Good morning and welcome to Ed Hubbard from 4Global's DataHub. Ed, how are you this morning?
Very good, thanks, Dave. Yeah, all good, all good. Sunny in southeast London, so can't complain.
Absolutely. Doesn't the sunshine make a difference? It's been a lovely day here in Leicestershire as well. So, Ed, we're talking today about the post-lockdown recovery survey that yourselves have obviously facilitated through the DataHub, who Max Associates have supported from an insight point of view, and also, of course, Big Wave and My Customer Lens. And today I just wanted to get your view around, particularly around participation, actually. So what surprised you the most around some of the stats that have been coming out?
So I think from my point of view, kind of some of the headline stats, which the eyes will kind of go to, 52% of people being less active during lockdown. You know, that is a key output of the survey. We know we've got this feeling that people are going to struggle to be active when they're within their four walls, especially when they could only have an hour a day outside. But to see in numbers is quite stark. Interestingly, when we look at some of the kind of more detail of the data, actually, and we look at some of the age groups, that perhaps the 45 to 64 age group, actually a lot of us thought might be hit more hard by this, have actually been more resilient, and actually their levels of activity have stayed pretty consistent. Whereas the younger age groups, the 15s, 24s, and around there, have actually been hit really hard, and their levels of activity have kind of fallen off a cliff. So those sorts of insights are starting to get really interesting from a kind of overall health and kind of physical activity point of view.
Yeah, absolutely, and that ability to cut into the data a little bit more, as you've just alluded to there, is really valuable, because I did something similar and I had a look at those numbers and I thought I was really quite surprised. But then I looked at what people were missing, and an awful lot of those younger people were actually missing the motivation of team members and things like that, and the socialization. It's almost as if the middle-aged, and I'm one of them at 53, are a bit more adaptable. We've gone, actually, let's get on the push bike, let's go for a run. I've got some dumbbells somewhere in the garage, I'll go and do something. Whereas those that are a bit younger appear to have really missed the leisure centre, the gym environment, and that bit around the socialization that they get from taking part in physical activity.
Yeah, most definitely, and I think it's really interesting to see how people of different levels of activity have responded differently as well. I know Lisa from Max Associates identified that actually the more active parts of society are actually the ones that perhaps are starting to move away from the member side. It was really interesting. It was encouraging, really encouraging from an industry point of view, to see kind of 88% of people willing to go back to exercise the same amount or more within leisure facilities. But what I'm really interested in is that 12%. So what is that other 12% doing? And of that 12%, 41%.
Okay, I've lost you, Ed. There you are. You're back.
Good.
41%, Ed.
Yeah, so 41% of those who aren't willing to come back into the facility, it's because they're more willing to do exercise more independently. And actually that ties in quite nicely into that kind of older, perhaps kind of those middle-aged adults and people who are more active. They've got more motivation, they've got more understanding of how they can be active. So actually, and I'll go on to it a bit more later, that for me is a bit of a window into quite a shift in the conventional member base. Yeah.
The other bit I looked at was the low seg groups, because we've had a look at postcodes and we put them into the socioeconomic groupings, and I was really pleased to see that people in the lower seg groups were actually valuing their leisure centres more and intended using it more than the people in the higher seg groups, and that for me is really positive, because one of the challenges that we often hear at the moment is around those low seg groups not actually taking part in physical activity in our building. So that was a really positive sign for me.
Hugely. I mean, yeah. How long have we got? I think for me that was probably the key insight out of all of the data that we've seen, because I wrote a blog the other day that said crisis is sometimes the only way to drive radical change. And actually, it does look, and again, this is some early insight that we're seeing, but with that kind of top level of physical activity kind of potentially moving outside of the facility, but a greater interest from lower socioeconomic groups, hard to reach groups, people who are less active, them being more active and also valuing their facility more. Actually, are we going to start to see a new member base come in into the facility and start being more active? Because that, you know, that's gold dust. That's gold dust for us as an industry. That's gold dust for Public Health England. That's gold dust. Gold dust for everybody. And that's the really kind of exciting part of this that we're starting to see. Because I don't think I expected that. Probably, I don't think a lot of the industry. I think we all thought that it was going to be the other way around, and actually, it was going to potentially create bigger divides. But at the moment, some of that data is really encouraging.
Yeah, absolutely. Somebody told me today that in Japanese, the same word for crisis is the same word for opportunity. And I think that's a really interesting light basically shining on those things that you've just said. So talk to me about how governing bodies, how operators should use this data then. What are the types of things you think they should be doing with it?
I think for me, there's a huge amount of data and insight that has been over the last couple of years available in the sector, and we're seeing across kind of our industry, lots of organisations, lots of have put a real effort into understanding what's happening and generating that insight and data, which is fantastic. I think now we've got such a level of robustness with this survey. You know, that's the really exciting thing, to have this level of granularity and be able to kind of dive into each of the different groups and the specific segments and still have a really robust sample size, means that we can act and we can recommend with a lot of kind of assurance that actually the data that we're working with is really robust. So that's a really powerful kind of positive element. I think one thing that we're hoping that data from the survey can do, and also from the white paper that we've written with UK Active, to try and inform some of the commercial discussions that we know are happening between local authorities and operators at the moment. You know, we know that it's a really challenging time in those kind of contracts and kind of ongoing operation of those facilities. Where we really want to get to as an industry is that the infrastructure's there, the people are there, whether it's the personal trainers, whether it's the programs, whether it's the buildings, are there to allow people to be more active when they're able to be, and it can start to capture some of the kind of latent demand that we've identified during this survey and other kind of insight that we've got. But we need to make sure that for the good of the industry long term, that offering is sustainable for the parties. So what we really hope is this data kind of can inform some of those commercial discussions, so that we get to an amicable position, and people can start to kind of put on those services as safely as possible.
Okay, and that makes a lot of sense. And you know, we talk about latent demand, and you know, every time I go out for a walk or a run or a cycle, there seems to be loads of people out there doing activity. And if, like we started with, 52% of our members are less active, that must also mean that there's a fair few people that have actually started a physical activity journey, because we've been told every day on the telly, you can go and do exercise, you're allowed to do it. So how are we maximising that as a sector? Does the white paper with UK Active cover any of that type of stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one really interesting point of view, and you know, I could absolutely be accused. I live in a bit of a bubble. I live in a nice area where people do a lot of exercise, and you see people exercising on a daily basis. Now, the positive side is that actually I'm seeing more kind of different people exercising, different groups, different demographics out doing kind of daily activity, which is fantastic. But I think what we're really looking to do is try and use the data and insight at a much more local level. So a lot of the findings that we're talking about are at a national level, because we need to push out those themes, and that can kind of drive some of the conversations. But really, for kind of operators, for local authorities, for organisations to use this, we need to understand what happens on a local level, what happens in a local catchment in terms of the profile of your potential customer base, what the potential risk of people not being able to come to the facility due to being over a certain age or things like that. So actually, I think the way that we can drive getting more kind of capturing some of that latent demand that you talked about is looking at a really local level and looking at actually what prioritized programs, what are the prioritized investments that we need to roll out in this specific area that can suit our local authority. Because I don't believe, and this statement is overused, but it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. And actually, we need to make sure that the reopening plan or the kind of engagement plan for new audiences is very focused and very targeted on what we think is required in those localities.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the thing I've noticed is and talking to people about things like analytics around social media, people are following local instructors. People are going back to a local instructor's filmed exercise class in their front room, whereas they're maybe not doing that with the bigger picture, the bigger names that are out there. And I think that whole locality-based piece that you've just been describing there comes back to that. It's about the personalization. I'm doing some work on personalization of the customer experience at the moment. And I think if we can personalize stuff, then I think we'll make a real difference. So given your opportunity, given your chance, what one thing would you like to see the sector doing differently as a result of the insight that we've given them? What does the future look like?
I think for me, it is the golden opportunity. Well, I think there's two golden opportunities. There's one that I talked about in terms of the kind of the shift of the conventional member base, and actually the opportunity to welcome new audiences into facilities, into programs, into the industry as a whole, and to provide, accessible and consistent ways of being active. I think that's, that, and we could go on for hours in terms of the impact of that on public health and the kind of the positive social and economic benefits. More specifically, I think it's a really, really vital opportunity to focus on potentially that older adults group. So, we've contributed to quite a lot of thought leadership and research in the past around actually how do people 60 plus engage with physical activity. I've been very, very vocal in that we cannot treat someone who's 65 in the same way as we are treating people who are 85, because that, and at the moment, a lot of the time we are, so we're just saying 60 plus, or we're saying 65 plus. And actually that 20-year age group gap is a lifetime. And we have to start developing tailored, focused ways of engaging those people. And the challenge here that might still be virtual, that might still be online, because we can't, people won't be able to engage in the facility. So I think for me, that is that's the next kind of absolute key point, is to get that age group and get the right tailored activity, whether it's online, and it goes back to your point around personalization. We need to have offers that those sorts of age groups that continue to be active in whatever the future holds over the next 12, 24 months.
Okay. Now, Ed, I'm really surprised because I thought we were going to go well over time, but I think that's a nice place to stop, particularly as, of course, there is a question about online membership within the report as well. So there is some insight and data to be had around what people's feelings are towards that. But Ed, thank you so much for your time. That's been really useful. And thank you to the support from Foot for Global and DataHub, because we couldn't have done the survey without you guys. So thank you so much for that. Ed, you take care, look after the family, and we'll see you soon.
See you soon.